Can everyone see me? I'm not the tallest. Thank you very much for that great introduction. I was actually a little bit nervous about this panel today. Not for the usual reasons of public speaking, more because I've been thinking about how on earth I win that Pernod Ricard product. So the guy I was sitting next to suggested a dad joke, so here goes. Actually, I was nervous about the dad joke too, after Kurt Burnett busted out a Ron Burgundy impersonation. I thought that was it. I had no chance. Anyway, so here we go. Sandwich walks into a bar. Barman says, "Sorry, mate, we don't serve food here." Anyway, hey! Oh, come on, that's got to be worth a bottle of Malibu. Okay, thank you very much to my panel in advance who joined me on stage. I've got questions for each of them. We're not going to go down along the line, but we will start along the line. If everyone could just introduce themselves.
Earnshaw from Amplifi, Chief Investment Officer.
Nat Harvey, Network Sales Director at Seven.
Hi, James Sampson, General Manager APAC at dataxu.
Brian Golbere, SVP Technology for IPONWEB.
And Toby, Dewar, Head of Media at Westpac Group.
Thank you, guys. And just to prove I just wasn't the last sort of hour and a half just worrying about my joke, I was thinking about how best to sort of sum up this morning and create some relevance for what we're talking about now. So what we've heard this morning, we've got more content than ever, quality content, and it's platform agnostic content. However, some of us, every morning, sorry guys, but we're waking to this syndicated audience, reports that are a sea of red. We are inundated with all other kinds of data, and we're being, we get constant calls from a number of data and technology companies suggesting that we measure things in different ways. Just this week, Peter Horgan said, actually, the whole industry's in limbo until we can prove ROI. And this morning we heard about, we just can't afford to miss out on this cultural connector that is television. So what we're going to talk about in the next 40 minutes to try and make sense of some of this is really turbocharging TV planning and campaign optimization. Is this going to be the key to all of our success? So starting with you, Toby, how valuable is it to buy travel enthusiasts or luxury shoppers rather than just standard demos?
Cool, thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the chance to be here. I think firstly, as was said this morning, that the starting point of buying broad demographics and sort of all people or mass demographics via TV is critically important. So I just want to make sure that the energy we put going forward is not just perhaps more on the pointy end. So if you're building a brand, perhaps in a category where you're trying to restore trust and reputation, things around TV and broad demographics and broad buying is really important. That being said, to answer the question, absolutely for us, it's sort of home buying or card buying and so forth is our opportunity and what we focus on. But the interesting piece about that is the secret's out. We've been doing it for about 5 years now. And it's kind of why things like REA and domain and those sort of other properties are going well, and they're a key part of our investment. So the opportunity and the conversation today is about how does TV claim a greater share, or how does TV compete and also perhaps outcompete against those current buys that we've had for a while. And what I've heard today, and certainly from my perspective, is there's a lot of hope and positivity around that. There's no doubt that when you look at what is the key role and the key strength of TV, that ability for emotional content, the brand safety, the viewability, the ability to access it at scale very quickly, they're the things that TV has always been very good at. And that gives me sort of the first point as we fold into VOZ, which I think Doug's been said about 100 times today. You can go home, mate, I think is the call. But nonetheless, that ability to understand cross-platform, again, is a really key piece that will fast forward further this opportunity that TV has. And therefore, this opportunity around what I can do to buy those segments and those interest groups are definitely appealing. What I feel as a client, and perhaps to the advertisers in the room, we need to get a head around is there's a willingness. We want to do that. We currently do that. But what I sense in that last panel is still a level of perhaps friction between how that does actually happen, how that gets traded, how that becomes available, and so forth. And I think today is a good sort of opportunity to tease that out and have that discussion. But I think as clients, we need to face into what does that mean in terms of how we buy, how we brief our audiences, or how do we structure our agencies and so forth. So there's a bit of disruption for us as a client, but the end goal is worth it.
So building on that point about how do we buy, Ash, give us your media agency point of view, the absolute, what's the value in in travel enthusiasts, luxury shoppers, for example?
Yeah, I think it's important that we haven't been kind of moths to a light on this issue. Just because something's new, like the shiny new thing, that you don't go straight to it, right? And I think for us, it's been about a slow and steady testing with our clients. We've heard about a few verticals and the data segments available, and not all those data segments are going to work for clients, we found. So I think that's the first thing. I think it's about steady testing. We heard that earlier from a Suncorp client about kind of looking at the return on investment that brings. So that's been our approach. For some of our advertisers, and the majority, I would say, they're still in that space about broad reach across category. So in effect, spot buying or the automation of broad demo buying. I'd say some of our clients have been somewhere in between the two. So kind of a blended approach around broad reach buying and then using kind of segmentation, so intent-based targeting, say with businesses like MCN, but now kind of pivoting into the connected TV space. And then there's probably a third bucket of clients, and probably the very kind of targeted clients that we've got on very specific campaigns that have kind of gone all in. I think, interestingly, we heard it earlier from Steve-O, the importance is about the ROI, so demonstrating the kind of the business results that drives. I think importantly from the buy side as well, I think the question of value. It's important without stating the obvious, for us that we're consistently driving both return on investment for clients, but also value. I think that's been the area that's been difficult so far. A couple of businesses in Australia have kind of gone off on their own and done a great job. We can see what MCN have done. We see what Nine are now doing with their proposition. For us, until we get a marketplace around that data segmentation, until we have a currency around that, I think it's hard to scale because we can't understand relative value. And I think either clients not being able to understand their own ROI or not being able to understand relative value is probably why the proposition is still in its infancy for us.
Hold that thought about the marketplace for a minute, because I'm going to come to you guys in a second about that. But Nat, just a sort of a final comment there around these guys want to buy those fine targets. Can you, from a network, provide them or sell them?
Yeah, I think Ash hit a point there around having a common understanding of what a segment is. I heard the other day about an auto segment that had auto intenders. We have 4 million auto intenders, which is really weird because only 1.5 million cars are sold a year. So I'm not quite sure how you have 4 million auto intenders when only a quarter of those are actually purchased in 12 months. So I think having a common understanding of what a segment is and what an intender is going to be really important. But what television will bring to the party is the ability to target through connected televisions and other digital platforms, but then also still have the best of both worlds with the huge scale that broadcast linear television brings. Because, Toby said it, the best strategies are ones that talk to everybody. But if you can have a more targeted conversation with those that are closer to the end of the funnel, fantastic. And now we can do that, which is really exciting.
So Brian, we just met, we had this word, a marketplace mentioned, obviously VOZ, we've heard VOZ, everyone has to say VOZ today. Does that get me another bottle of Malta? Sorry. Brian, can you give us a sort of a thumbnail sketch from your point of view? You travel around the world a lot. You deal with a lot of different countries, a lot of different markets. First of all, can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what OpenAP is in the USA, and do we need it? And then answer the question whether or not you think, from your point of view, do you think we need an Australian OpenAP to really maximise this opportunity for segment selling?
Sure. So there's what OpenAP is now and what OpenAP was envisioned to be several years ago.
Okay.
What it is now is basically an agreed upon aggregation of data that defines the audience that's available across all of the participants, an audited delivery mechanism so this is what you actually got. That's pretty much it. Okay. Right? There's some nuances. What it was supposed to be, or what it was envisioned to be, supposed to maybe loaded term, but what it was envisioned to be was a marketplace for people to buy TV at scale in the US market. There were lots of commentary from, this is 3-4 years ago, lots of commentary from agencies like, yes, we'll do a deal with Turner or NBC or somebody else, but we want to have consistent, it's too much work, there's too much to go forward. And what it effectively has become, and I don't particularly know why, but it's narrowed down to this very insider focus of what's useful for us. Great, it's useful, but it's not sufficient. It doesn't move the market forward. You still see innovation coming from the participating companies and have a lot of their own things. But to go with the local reference, so if you look also what Sharp reinforces in his stuff, it's what is going to win is if you can drive sales, and that requires availability in the market, right? And fundamentally, having a marketplace means your stuff, your audience, is available. And that's not much further along than it was 3-4 years ago. Australia doesn't seem to be much further along. You can go and get better product from any of the individual participants in most markets now that are advancing. But you still have to deal with each individual market. You have to deal with each individual broadcaster, which is, it's great. It's not that's not a negative, but it doesn't fulfill the promise of saying we have a marketplace, because the marketplace is important to be able to value your inventory for yourself and compare against all competing offers you have for your available audience. But for the marketer, and if you look at it from a buyer's perspective, and more importantly, someone brought up, there's many more SME businesses that would like to buy. They don't want to do a deal with 5 different buying entities, engines, transactions. It's not going to happen. Right, what they get from a global platform, because they came from the bottom up, is anybody can buy what they want. Now you can argue how clear, transparent those things can be resolved, but the point is it's available in the market to a broad range of people and presented in a way that works for the buyer, not that works for the insiders.
Okay.
Right, and that's I think kind of what OpenAP envisioned. It hasn't reached that.
So what you've described there sounds more like a hub, a purchasing hub, as opposed to somewhere where you can choose different audiences to buy.
In part, but I think market's a better definition, because the idea of a marketplace is that there can be many participants that can bring their own value to it. What the model of a lot of the kind of global technology companies is they are the marketplace, right? And the opportunity is you're not going to beat them, right? I mean, you can aspire, great. But good luck, right? You don't have the technology, you don't have the people, you don't have the scale, you can't leverage that. Just like Netflix can leverage production budgets on a global basis, a local player can leverage that market only to the extent of who they can reach. So you can do some licensing deals, but you have to live within your budget. If you can create a marketplace where everybody can make more money, because they can trade in a way that protects their data, that lets them build assets, that lets them actually make their message that TV is effective. Look, here it's effective. People will buy it if they know it's effective, but do they know it's effective? Outside of this room, who knows it's effective, right? That's what a marketplace is. It lets the market decide what goes on, and then yes, there will be winners and losers, but that's not going to change. It's who can participate and who has an incentive to participate, rather than it's a zero-sum game. The marketplace should raise the standard for everyone else, because you should find the best buyer against all available buyers. If you have more buyers, you're going to get a better price. Is it the price you want? Well, that I don't know.
So James, what's your view on this in terms of dataxu's involvement in the marketplace, or directly with clients who are adopting addressable TV?
Yeah. So for those that don't know, dataxu is what's called a demand-side platform. We work primarily in the digital space, but more and more over the last couple of years, that digital space has been extending into a lot of your assets on connected televisions. In Australia, for instance, we kind of see 2 million connected TVs, people watching ad-supported content on connected TVs in Australia. And that's kind of risen a couple 100,000 from Christmas time. So Australians are watching this kind of content, and they're watching it on the nice premium connected TV set. They're also watching it on their phones and their PCs, but Australia on a global basis is super high when it comes to consumer adoption of OTT services on the device, on the connected TV device. And so dataxu, we kind of help agencies typically go buy their audiences against these different touch points that a consumer might have. And more in Australia, that's happening on the actual TV set. And so what you see is that from the marketer perspective and the agency perspective, they're kind of used to buying this way now in the digital world, around buying pinpoint precise audiences. They like it. They're seeing ROI from it. And they're trying to kind of do that in any way, shape, or form they can in the world of TV, which has traditionally been not, just from the nature of the technology, not been sort of like a one-to-one environment. But now they have that ability. So you're kind of seeing these different forms of TV pop up. Advanced TV, there's kind of umbrella terms, programmatic TV, advanced TV, addressable TV. They're all just different ways that, consumers are consuming content, and advertisers and agencies can kind of reach those people and measure them the way they want to measure. I think like the concept of these kind of consortiums or marketplaces, like it's a good thing because like it's just educating the market more on like where things are going. Probably not the perfect solution, like you're just mentioning, doesn't really tie to like the measurement standards that we keep hearing about all day, where people plan a certain way and measure a certain way, but these kind of act a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. But generally, I think most marketers are kind of moving in that direction where they know that their audience is kind of consuming things. They see those ratings that you're going down on linear, but they see the consumption going up in other places, and they're just trying to reach them effectively. And they're willing to sort of change the way a little bit that they measure things, while like the official measurement kind of catches up.
I think sorry, Sarah, do you mind?
Okay.
I think that we still have I think that we've still got a really long way to go though, because what we see on our side of the fence is still trading television the way we always have, and Steve-O here, it's been 60 years, but not valuing eyeballs at certain times of the day, or if it's under half a tarp, it's just ridiculous because you value an eyeball on video. Why is it any different? And no one can actually really answer that other than Ubiquity, because there's an average rating tied to it, which is just so ancient. Sorry if there's anyone from Ubiquity here, but is there anyone from Ubiquity here? We can chat about it after.
Sponsor, I think.
But
I think they might be.
But I have to say, it's really frustrating because we get the request to evolve our model and how we sell television and how we talk to consumers, yet we're still working off this old benchmark, which doesn't value all of the eyeballs, yet if you're in a new platform, all of those eyeballs are sacred. So I think, if we're going to move into this space, everything has to apply to that. There's nothing that frustrates me more. And I heard about a case study in Sweden where a company, actually one of the television networks, Christian told me about it last night if he's still here, that they only bought 0 tarp spots, right? And they had this scooter that they were selling. Mm-hmm. They sold out within a couple of weeks, and they only bought 0 tarp spots because there's still people watching it. Mm-hmm. Like on video, like on connected televisions, there's still people watching it, yet that audience isn't valued. So we have to work together to do that. Television networks can't do it themselves. We have to do it with agencies and measurement systems as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably worth just building on that. I think I'm not sure about buying strategies around 0 rating tarps, but we can pick that up.
I'll show you the case study.
But I think just picking up on that, I think we're here to talk about the future of TV. And really interesting insights into kind of data-led targeting and different cost structures in those areas. I think it's not just the sell side where we have to evolve. I think like clients working with auditors, working with the ways that new businesses set up, both from kind of a short-termist point of view around, you need long-term relationships to develop these kind of targeting strategies and sort of data strategies. But also the way from a buy side that you are, that we're doing new business actually inhibits the ability to grow the sector because it's all based on old metrics. Steve-O spoke about peak off peak, the way you are remunerated is around that. So I think there's not just the technology side that needs to evolve and the demand from clients, but also the way that agencies are set up to work with them to drive their businesses forward.
Well, that's an interesting one about metrics, isn't it? So let's just talk about cost-effective incremental reach. So question both to Brian and James, maybe starting with Brian. Have you seen in your travels mass reach brands using addressable TV to really improve their cost-effective incremental reach?
Yes.
Is that how people are using it? Yes.
Yeah. I think there's a good number of examples we've seen in the US, different FMCG goods, adult beverages, things like that. The ROI is clear to the marketer. They work well with the broadcaster or distributor. The challenge is bringing it to scale. Like they can run it, it's very one-off, but they see strong return on investment. It tends to kind of cap out because, okay, now we want to do a coordinated buy on second screen, or we want to, and the coordination effort for that quickly overwhelms the available time and budget. The effectiveness is there, like they're willing to take the steps, but it doesn't, and they become one-off and one-off and one-off, driving foot traffic to stores, tying into transit information, and who can be switched or directed to the new store. There's a lot of very interesting and very effective outcomes for the advertisers, but it requires a tremendous amount of coordination in market. Is the data consistent? Are you measuring the same? You want to have a different viewability tag. You want to it's too much work, right? And I think that the value of TV is reach and scale. And if you can synthesize the reach and scale in a somewhat personalized level for each advertiser for what they want, and combine it in a repeatable way, then again, you drive much more valuable advertising outcomes, which again, people will pay for convenience, right? They will pay for the audience that they want that delivers the result they want. Otherwise, not that many people are going to continue to do it on a one-off basis.
And James, from a dataxu point of view, have you seen your product being used to really drive cost-effective incremental reach?
Yeah, actually. So, we operate globally. I can mention some U.S. stuff. I can mention stuff in Australia, but generally there's this concept of, hey, it's actually still kind of cost-effective to reach people on linear. We've kind of heard that a few times. Like if I want to reach a certain percentage of my audience, I get to a certain point, it's pretty cost-effective.
It's getting expensive, but it's getting
more expensive, but still relatively
Could
good.
be more expensive.
Once you want to get prices are going up.
We should talk about value rather than price, perhaps.
Needs to start rating.
The value is becoming clearer.
Yeah, but you're like, once you get to a certain point against like whatever audience somebody wants to target, they're like, okay, it's getting like really expensive to get incremental reach because I'm just like getting more and more frequency against the same people just because there's a limited set of people watching like linear, just a fact globally, not just here, everywhere. And so you're like, to get that extra incremental, it's tough. So people are kind of looking for solutions now to say, how do I sort of get deduplicated reach extension outside of my don't reach the people I reached on TV, but I want to reach them in other places, connected TV, OTT services, whatever. And so you have these like marketers who are saying, hey, like I want to reach a strategic audience. I don't just want it to be age and gender. I want it to be like auto intenders if I'm selling cars. I can reach this many of them here. How do I kind of like get rid of those people from my digital buys and just get pure extension in these other forms? And luckily, like the technology is there to do that now. This is kind of like a couple of years old, but it's like, to kind of kludge this together like a couple of years ago would have been difficult, but now it's pretty seamless to do. Like the data's there to do it, the buying system's there to do it, the measurement system's there to do it. So it's really more like changing the mindset of the agencies and marketers around how they buy and how they measure it, because that's kind of like the biggest challenge is like, hey, I get that this works, but like I can't fit it into like whatever report that I'm trying to fit it into. But like you can see like really, really interesting results around just incremental reach on a cost-effective basis in Australia, here in the US, that kind of proves that, hey, like from just a pure cost perspective to reach somebody, it's good. Like it looks better. You're kind of talking like 50 to 100% better than just kind of like really blowing out a TV audience after a certain point. But then you get like the measurability around it too that helps actually prove the real ROI, not just like the media metrics, but like did somebody go to like my website and configure a card? Did somebody sign up for a credit card? Did somebody walk into my store? Like you can sort of tie all this activity now to like real world results and bring measurability to TV that wasn't really there before. So that really, from what we see, TV like greatly influences like all that downstream behavior. But now you can actually tie it together a bit easier than you could, and it's kind of moving more money to TV actually.
So you mentioned the marketer's mindset. So Toby, have you got a comment on that? So is it all just too hard?
Yeah, I just need to sell home loans. I'm just trying to get my head around that complexity and how you boil it down. And I often think about the agency that we have within Media Lab and how they keep up with this complexity. It's pretty overwhelming. So that worries me, what support I'm giving and what structure do I have, because at the moment I've still got quite separate units in the agency and I don't think we're geared for that. So we need to think about that. But the opportunity for us, we've got 5 different brands that are all targeting at some point similar home buyers in a similar segment. So back to the question around how do you use the sense of addressability and be sort of hyper local and target that. I mean, that's of mass appeal because then we can be really smart about going into key areas where we know the brand maybe is considered higher. The complexity on the flip side then is, to your point, how do you gear up on the lot of iterations in the creative and the reporting on that. So not getting hung up on the complexity, but the opportunity far overpowers that and certainly makes us really push forward and want to do it, that's for sure.
So sort of getting to the real kind of, I guess, the end of this, how do we bring it all together? So how can broadcasters and marketers help each other to really optimize campaigns? So one of the things we were thinking about is, do advertisers need to share outcome data like site visit and sales? And I know I've worked both sides now, and I know that data is pretty hard to come by. So I'd really like to, all of you to think, to answer this question, or from your point of view, in terms of, how important is sharing that to really get to this ROI number? And starting with you, Ash.
Yeah, I mean, I think, not to kind of boil it down to sort of practicalities, but I think it depends on what the client wants to do. We've got clients that have got very evolved data offerings in-house. They're very comfortable with understanding their own data and then briefing out the market. I've always seen that structure add value. I think that if it adds value to the business, great. I think that the clients need to be more comfortable with sharing their data, working with agencies as well as the publisher set to, because in the end it's about driving better outcomes. So the optic I would have is, I believe that has benefits, but we also see very evolved offerings in-house, and I don't see why it should be one or the other.
Nat, from your point of view and your time at Seven, so obviously you've worked both sides as well. Have you had any success persuading clients to share data so that you can really close the loop on that optimisation?
Yes and no. I think that there's probably two parts to it. So the first one is we often don't really get a true understanding of what the objective is, and that sounds crazy, but it's true. So the more that we understand that and what the desired result is, the more that we can tailor how we work with a client and what else they're doing outside television, because we're not naive to think that that's all they're doing, or BVOD and television, short form, and everything else that we do, newspapers, magazines.
Yeah, remember those, yep.
But then on the flip side of that is, we very rarely, when we're doing post-analysis presentations and we're looking at certainly large sponsorships, some clients will share some information, but then others don't share it, which makes it really difficult for us to be able to, I guess, improve on the next time that we look to work with them on something. So I do think it's really valuable, so long as that it's real attribution and it can help us inform decisions moving forward.
James?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, there's like an inherent why would a buyer share with the seller what's working? They're probably fearful it's going to jack up the price or whatever, right? So I think there's a reason why people are sort of wary of sharing that around. But generally, what I see, and I think it was brought up in the previous panel, this concept of kind of data now is a place where media owners and advertisers are collaborating more. And so an advertiser might know, hey, these are the people that are high-value prospects or high-value customers, or the people that bought something. They sort of know stuff about their customers, and they're saying, I want to reach these people in your environment. I'm glad you're telling me about all of your audience, and I think some of those are valuable, but really, how do I reach the people that I know are important to my business? And I might not share the exact results with you about did they generate a sale exactly from this impression that you guys served on one of your platforms, but there is ways to say, yep, actually I am getting ROI and I can measure it, and I'm going to be buying more and more of these audiences in your environment versus yours because I seem to be able to find them better and kind of measure it better and all that. So I think there's easy collaboration points there, but I don't think you'll ever get to the point where somebody's yeah, you drove $1 million of sales, because it's just the blanket opening to say, okay, cool, I can charge you $500,000 more in the next one.
Well, I want to build on that, because I think it's not about charging more, but the best partnerships we have is when they do share that information, because then we co-create what happens next. And if there is true trust there, they don't think we're going to come in and jack up the price. We would if we could, but we don't do that. Because then, I'm quite open with clients in saying that I want you to be successful and make more money, because you're going to come and spend it back with us, right? There's nothing wrong with saying that. So I think that if clients can have a trust in their media partners, and media partners have to earn that trust, obviously, then you're actually going to get much better outcomes in the future. Yeah. So I hope that anybody in this room, if you can take away one thing from whatever I say today, it's that, is, trust us to be able to help you drive your business forward, because it's in our best interest for your business to drive forward.
Yeah, I think that's the importance of a marketplace. That's the issue. Whether you kind of come, I hear what you're saying, and obviously where you're coming from, but if there's a marketplace, you can check that problem. So I think if there's a marketplace, it would solve that issue.
Brian?
I would generally agree with everything before. I would make a few differentiations. One is, I think that you have to trust in the value of your audience, and you have what you have, right? Don't try to overstate it, don't try to understate it, importantly. You need to be able to, if you go to a smaller business, they probably want a much deeper relationship. They don't have these skills. These are things that are being developed by platforms like Salesforce and Oracle and Adobe and people like that. So those people are working on how do you find your audiences based on that. And if you look at direct-to-consumer brands that end up moving to TV, they run their own digital side. They want to have some kind of partnership, but there's a boundary to it, right? So the boundaries are what are going to vary in the transaction. So you may want to be like, I'm not telling you anything, just give me this audience and make it easier to transact. Or can you help me drive and find that? But in the end, what the buyer wants, and it's up to them, either with their agency or with the broadcaster or software or whatever, to define who's interesting to them. And then you help them find that. And the easier it is to find that audience, okay, I have this audience in print, I have this audience in TV, I have this audience in radio, same for everyone else, then they can make an informed decision and they will trust you. But I think it's unrealistic to expect them to give you that data, just like you weren't going to give them your data. So there has to be a boundary defined.
And finally, Toby.
Yeah, I like that reciprocation point, and that I agree that trust lends itself to seeing more. So, but I walk in your shoes, Nat, and I times that by 1,000 different clients to understand deeply my business, and that freaks me out. And I've worked with you, you're bloody smart, but I go, shit, how do you keep up with that? So from a practical sense, and the other bit which sort of frustrates me is an overclaiming, which I think what you were saying before about that last touch attribution to that, therefore that's my sale, if I'm talking about perhaps web traffic. And that does happen a lot in terms of people sort of narrowing down into results from a client and thinking about that their contribution was it. The interesting thing, I was trying to scope the room out before, and there doesn't appear to be anyone from an outdoor company, perhaps a magazine company, or I know there's clearly some people from press and so forth. But if I'm in outdoor, to pick on them, as much as I do support that channel, why wouldn't you be here today learning about what's happening with TV? Like, why wouldn't you be here? And it's not to steal the secrets necessarily, but it's to understand what role you play as an outdoor company or a radio company to actually support and complement what's happening with TV. So my ask is not necessarily that each media owner is really close to my business and knows the complexities of my business, but I expect that you know media exceptionally well and you understand what role your channel plays in an incremental way or a complementary way to other channels. And I feel that, observing that room, and I could be wrong, I'm pretty confident that sort of narrowness in how we look at it and how we sort of fight between channels, and there's a need to be competitive, but that to me as a client, I think is the opportunity going forward.
Thank you. So bit of a summary there. So Nat wants you really shit clients, share your data, you'll get a better outcome. We actually is saying that really we need to have a marketplace, some sort of consolidated view, and I'm assuming that's not just for ease of transaction, that's for some sort of sensible or making sense of audiences. And I think that also goes to your point, Nat. James, you're saying it's actually a lot more, it's easier than you think. That actually a couple of years ago, I think you used the word kludge. That's kind of Heath Robinson, all stuck together, but it's becoming more seamless.
Yeah, you can kind of do it all from one platform pretty easily.
And Brian, what's your key takeout from, what would you like people to go away?
I mean, I think look at how do you grow your business collaboratively, right? Stick to what you're good at, embrace what you're good at, and not try to overreach unless it's actually going to give you a competitive advantage, right? And understand the market you're in.
And finally, I think Toby made a really great point, and I think that's one that I'm certainly taking on from an agency point of view, and share with my other media partners that actually what clients need is for everyone to understand how these channels are fitting together in a new world. So thank you very much for your time, everybody, and for listening, and thank you to my panel.